The first light of dawn creeps across the marshy fields of Runnymede, its soft glow casting an ethereal hue over the gathering. The wind stirs the leaves in the trees, bending the branches low as if to listen. There is a stillness here, an unspoken tension that hangs in the air, as though the land itself is holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. The ground beneath the feet of those who have gathered is soft, yielding to the weight of history being etched upon it. Among them, a lone figure stands, a man whose face bears the lines of struggle and defeat. He is not a warrior nor a noble, but a king who once ruled with the unquestionable authority of a monarch, whose reign now teeters on the edge of collapse. King John of England, his brow furrowed with the burden of his crown, stands before a weathered table, his hands trembling slightly as they hover over a piece of parchment. The parchment, yellow with age, rests on the surface like a forgotten relic. To him, it is just a document, words on paper, yet he knows deep down that it is so much more. This single sheet of parchment will bind him, body and soul, to a future he cannot control. It will change the course of his rule, the future of his kingdom, and the lives of countless men and women who have never known anything but the weight of royal decree. It is the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, a symbol of rebellion, of justice, and of a power that has slipped from his grasp. As King John lifts his hand to sign, the air is thick with the murmurs of those who stand behind him, the barons, the men whose discontent has brought them to this moment. They stand not as subjects, but as equals, their eyes fixed upon the king as he prepares to sign away his authority. The murmurs grow louder, tinged with anticipation, yet there is no triumphant cheer. The moment is too heavy for celebration. This is not a victory. It is a concession. It is the relinquishing of control, the acknowledgement that even kings are not above the law. A cold wind blows across the field, rustling the trees and carrying with it the scent of damp earth and distant rain. The first drops begin to fall, gently at first, as though the sky itself is uncertain about what is to come. The gathered crowd, a sea of barons in dark, heavy cloaks, shifts slightly, as if to protect themselves from the impending storm. The weight of the moment presses down on King John's shoulders, and for the first time in many years, he feels the full weight of his failure. He has been backed into a corner, and now there is no escape. The barons, the men who had once pledged their loyalty to him, are now his accusers. Their demands have been clear, their intentions unwavering. They have come for justice, for the rights that were denied them, and they will not leave without it. The king's hand hovers over the parchment, his fingers trembling slightly as the quill dips into the ink. The sound of the quill scratching against the surface of the paper echoes through the stillness, a sound that seems to reverberate through the very earth itself. In that moment, time seems to slow, as though the kingdom itself is holding its breath, waiting for the king's decision. The ink spreads across the paper, each stroke a symbol of defeat, of submission, of the inevitable transformation that is about to take place. King John pauses, his eyes scanning the words on the page, but he does not truly see them. They are not just words. They are the end of an era, the end of a reign that had once seemed unshakable. The Magna Carta is a document that speaks not only of rights and privileges, but of the fragility of power. It is a declaration that the king, in all his might and grandeur, is not invincible. It is a reminder that there are forces greater than a monarch, that the people, when united, can challenge even the most entrenched authority. The king's eyes flicker toward the barons who stand at the edges of the clearing, their faces grim, their eyes hard with the knowledge that this is only the beginning. They have fought long and hard to reach this point, and though their victory is not yet complete, it is close. Their demands, once seen as the wild rants of discontented, have now been given voice. The Magna Carta will not erase the years of suffering they have endured under crown, but it is a promise that the king will no longer be able to act with impunity, that he will be held accountable for his actions, that his rule will be tempered by the needs and rights of his subjects. With a steadying breath, King John presses his seal into the soft wax, the sound of the breaking wax ringing through the silence like a bell tolling for the end of an era. The deed is done. The ink is dry. The Magna Carta is no longer just a piece of parchment. It is a living, breathing document that will echo through the ages, its significance growing with each passing year. The king's heart sinks as he takes in the enormity of what has just transpired. The The power he once held so securely in his grasp has slipped away, and he cannot retrieve it. He is no longer the absolute ruler of England. He is a monarch bound by law, by the very people he once ruled without question. And yet, as the document is passed among the barons, their expressions are not those of jubilant triumph. There is no celebration, no shout of victory. The weight of what has been achieved is not lost on them. They know that while they have won a significant battle, the war is far from over. The Magna Carta is a promise, but it is also a burden. It is a reminder that power, once surrendered, is not easily reclaimed. The ink on the page may be dry, but the consequences of this moment will be felt for generations to come. The rain begins to fall in earnest now, a steady downpour that soaks the earth and dampens the spirits of the men who have gathered here. But the storm is not just the heavens. It is a storm that has been brewing for years, a storm that will continue to rage in the hearts of those who seek justice, who demand accountability from those in power. The Magna Carta may have been signed, but the road ahead is uncertain. As the king retreats from the table, his head bowed, his heart heavy, the barons disperse, their faces somber, their steps slow but resolute. The thunder rumbles in the distance, a reminder that this is not the end, but only the beginning. The kingdom has been irrevocably changed, and the world, for a brief moment, seems to hold its breath. The Magna Carta is not just a document. It is a symbol. It is a symbol of the shifting tides of power, of the struggle between the ruled and the rulers, of the eternal battle for justice and fairness in a world ruled by the few. It is a testament to the courage of those who dare to stand against tyranny, who dare to demand that even kings bow to the law. It is a quiet revolution, one that does not echo with the clash of swords or the roar of armies, but with the steady, unyielding force of words and principles. And in the distance, as the rain begins to fall more heavily, the land seems to whisper, as though it is calling out to those who will come after, to those who will one day look upon this moment in history, and remember that this was the moment when power was no longer an unassailable fortress, but a fragile thing that could be shaped and tempered by the hands of those who believed in something greater than themselves. The Magna Carta may have been signed, but the legacy of that day, the significance of that quiet revolution, will continue to reverberate through the ages, shaping the future of England and the world beyond. The echoes of this moment will never fade, for it is in the signing of the Magna Carta that the foundation of modern liberty was laid, a foundation built upon the belief that no man, not even a king, is above the law. As the rain falls, the world seems to breathe again. The past has been written, but the future remains unwritten. And though King John's reign will never be the same, the world has not been changed by him. It has been changed by the courage of those who stood up and said, "No more." The Magna Carta is a testament to that courage, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, change is possible. It is the document that changed everything. The wind howls across the marshes of Runnymede, bending the tall grasses low like soldiers in the face of storm. Dark clouds churn overhead, blocking the sun, casting the world below in an eerie, oppressive gloom. The distant rumble of thunder echoes through the air, a harbinger of the momentous clash that is about to unfold. The earth beneath the feet of those gathered is soft and heavy with the weight of centuries of bloodshed, and yet the land itself seems to tremble in anticipation. The sound of hooves echoes faintly in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. In the midst of the gathering, a lone figure stands, draped in a dark cloak, his face shadowed by the storm. His name is Robert Fitzwalter, a man who has lived through the brutality of King John's reign. He has seen firsthand the cruelty, the capriciousness of a king who ruled with iron fist, indifferent to the suffering of his people. Today, however, Fitzwalter stands not as a subject, but as an equal among the barons who have come together to challenge the monarch's authority. Today, he stands with the weight of history upon his shoulders. Around him, the barons gather in solemn silence, their faces drawn tight with the knowledge of what is to come. They are not here to celebrate. They are here to demand the end of King John's tyranny, to demand justice for the suffering that has plagued the kingdom for far too long. The Magna Carta is their weapon, their shield, their hope. It is a document born not of mere rebellion, but of necessity, of the realization that the time has come for people to rise against the unchecked power of a monarch who has long forgotten the meaning of justice. The wind picks up, howling through the clearing, carrying with it the scent of rain, of earth, and of something more, a sense of inevitability. In the distance, the sound of hooves grows louder. The king approaches. King John of England, his dark figure cutting through the gloom, rides at the head of a procession of knights and soldiers. His face is grim, set in a mask of defiance, but there is something else in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, of fear. King John has never been a beloved monarch, nor a particularly wise one. His reign has been marked by constant conflict, financial instability, and the relentless push of barons and commoners alike, all demanding their rights. His inability to manage his kingdom, his constant need for money to fund failed military campaigns, and his tendency to alienate even his closest allies have left him with few supporters. The kingdom he rules is crumbling, and the forces of rebellion have finally coalesced into something that cannot be ignored. As the king and his retinue draw closer, the barons stand straighter, their faces hard with resolve. The air is thick with tension, and for a moment, it feels as though the world itself has stopped, holding its breath. The king dismounts, his armored boots sinking into the damp earth. He approaches a table where the Magna Carta rests, the document that will seal his fate, the fate of his kingdom and the future of his reign. The sound of the king's footsteps as he approaches is deafening in the silence. But even as he stands before the table, there is no fanfare, no dramatic moment. There is only the quiet rustle of the wind and the distant rumble of thunder. King John gazes down at the parchment, his fingers lingering above it for a moment, as if he is not quite ready to sign. But he knows he must. There is no other choice. The barons will not relent. His grip on the throne has weakened, and it is slipping away faster than he can grasp it. The Magna Carta is not just a document. It is a contract, a demand for change that has been written in the blood of rebellion and the ink of law. The king's gaze flickers over the faces of the barons, their eyes burning with the determination of those who have nothing left to lose. He has seen this look before, the same look in the eyes of the men who fought against him in the bloody battles of his reign. It is the look of those who have reached a point of no return, those who have made their peace with the price of resistance. And yet, as King John raises his quill to the parchment, there is a hesitation. It is not a hesitation born of fear, but of resignation, a deep, unspoken understanding that the world, as he knows it, is coming to an end. The ink of his signature will mark the final nail in the coffin of his absolute power. No longer will he rule with unchecked authority. No longer will he be the final word in the lives of his subjects. With a stroke of his quill, he will bind himself to a new reality, one where even kings must answer to the law. The quill touches the parchment, the ink spreading in the shape of his signature, and in that moment, the weight of history seems to collapse upon the room. The sound of the quill scratching against the paper is faint but unmistakable. It is the sound of a kingdom being reborn, of a monarch yielding to the will of the people. The ink spreads, dark and final, and the king's seal presses down onto the parchment with resounding finality. The sound of wax breaking echoing across the field like the toll of a bell. The moment has come. The Magna Carta has been signed. The world will never be the same. But even as the king's seal is pressed into the wax, the barons stand silent. There is no cheer, no shout of victory. For them, this moment is not about celebration. It is about survival. The Magna Carta is not just a victory over the king. It is a reminder of the fragile nature of power, a recognition that the king's reign was built on the backs of those he now has no choice but to appease. The rain begins to fall in earnest now, thick and heavy, as if the heavens themselves are bearing witness to the momentous change that has just taken place. The wind picks up again, carrying with it the scent of the storm, of earth and iron. The barons stand tall, their cloaks billowing in the wind, their faces unreadable. They have won a victory, but it is a victory tempered by the knowledge that the battle is not yet over. The Magna Carta may have been signed, but the struggle for justice, for accountability, has only just begun. King John, his face drawn and tired, turns away from the table, his steps slow, as though the weight of the document he has just signed is a physical burden. His knights and soldiers gather around him, their expressions grim, but there is no protest, no word of defiance. The king has lost. The barons have forced him to concede, to give up the absolute power he once held. As the king retreats into the safety of his retinue, the barons stand still, their eyes fixed on the document that has now become the symbol of their triumph. They know that this moment, this document, will be remembered for centuries to come. It is a turning point, the moment when the tide of power shifted, when the monarchy was forced to confront the reality of its limitations. The rain falls in sheets now, soaking the earth beneath their feet, as if to cleanse of the blood and suffering that has stained it for so long. The thunder rolls in the distance, and the barons turn to walk away, their faces set in the grim knowledge that they have won a battle. But the war is far from over. The Magna Carta is only the beginning. It is a symbol of what they have achieved, but it is also a symbol of the struggle that lies ahead. As they disperse, the sound of their footsteps is swallowed by the roar of the storm. The Magna Carta is more than a document. It is a promise. It is a promise that no man, no king, is above the law. It is a promise that justice will be done, and that the voice of the people will no longer be silenced. But it is also a reminder that the price of freedom is steep, and that the road to true justice is long and fraught with peril. The storm rages on, the wind howling through the trees, and the land remains heavy with the weight of what has just transpired. The Magna Carta has been signed, and the world, for better or worse, has been irrevocably changed. The echoes of this moment will resonate through the ages, a reminder that even in the darkest times, when all seems lost, change is possible. The king may have signed his name, but it is the people, the barons, who have forged the future. The storm may have passed, but the legacy of that day, the legacy of the Magna Carta, will endure forever. The great hall of Windsor Castle is cold, its stone walls echoing with the distant sounds of footsteps, the clinking of armor and the low murmur of courtiers. A single fire crackles in the hearth, its flames flickering as if uncertain of their place in this scene. The shadows stretch long across the floor, bending like the twisted limbs of forgotten trees, while the weight of the silence presses heavily in the room. The air is thick with a sense of inevitability, of a moment that will echo through the ages. Here in this space, where kings have sat and made decisions that shaped the course of history, King John stands, uncertain. The throne that he occupies, a seat of unimaginable power, now seems more like a prison, and the crown he wears feels like a shackle. King John is not an old man. He is in the prime of his life, yet his face is drawn and haggard, the lines of his brow carved deep with the weight of a troubled reign. His once regal posture now seems hunched, as though he has borne the burden of the crown for far too long. His eyes, dark and tired, scan the faces of the men who have gathered in his presence. Barons, knights, lords, and advisors, those who have sworn allegiance to him but whose loyalty has been tested by his cruelty, his failures, and his unrelenting pursuit of more power. These men, once his companions in governance, are now the ones who stand before him with a demand that he cannot ignore. The Magna Carta, the great charter of liberties, has arrived in the hands of his adversaries. The king turns his gaze to the parchment before him, lying on the table like a silent witness to his downfall. The document that lies there is not merely a collection of words, but a demand, no, a decree from those who have long suffered under his rule. It is not a letter of peace. It is a declaration of accountability, a challenge to the absolute power he once held. And in this moment, King John knows that his reign will never be the same. The Magna Carta has been written in the blood of rebellion and the ink of resolve. For years, the barons have quietly seethed beneath his rule, enduring his extravagant spending on failed military campaigns, his exorbitant taxes, and his arbitrary imprisonments of those who dare to defy him. The king's inability to manage the kingdom has turned his once supported nobility into an army of discontent. Yet, as the Magna Carta rests in front of him, it is not just a rebellion that stirs in King John's chest. It is a knowledge that he, like the barons, is now a man caught in the grip of forces beyond his control. The barons who have presented the Magna Carta stand nearby, their faces unreadable, their eyes fixed on the king as he prepares to take the final step. Their demands are clear. They ask not just for the reform of taxes or for the return of lands that have been unjustly seized, but for a radical shift in the balance of power. They ask that the king be held accountable for his actions, that he no longer rule as an autocrat above the law, but as a king bound by the same laws that govern his people. They ask for protection of their rights, and for protection of the church, for the right of the common people to be heard. The Magna Carta is their weapon, their shield, their final stand against a monarch who has proved himself unwilling to govern with fairness. The weight of this request is not lost on King John. As his hand hovers over the document, he feels the full burden of his kingship, the burden of all those who have stood before him, the burden of history itself. The signing of the Magna Carta is not just a surrender of power. It is an acknowledgement that his reign has been flawed, that his vision of kingship, one so absolute and unquestionable, is being ripped away from him. In this moment, King John is not the powerful monarch who once struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. He is a man, struggling to hold on to the last vestiges of his authority. The fire in the hearth crackles louder, as if mocking him, as the weight of his indecision presses upon him. He knows what the consequences will be if he refuses to sign the Magna Carta. Civil war, further rebellion, and a kingdom torn apart by violence. His enemies are already at the gates, and though he has the support of his soldiers, it is clear that he cannot defeat an entire nation of barons, lords, and peasants united in their desire for justice. Yet, to sign the Magna Carta is to concede that he has failed as a ruler. To sign it is to admit that his kingship has been a failure, that his authority has been eroded by his own arrogance, by his inability to listen to the cries of his people. The room is heavy with silence as King John's fingers tremble slightly, hovering over the wax that will bear his seal. The seal, the symbol of his power, his identity, will be pressed into the wax, and with it his authority will be irrevocably altered. The king's eyes flicker over the faces of the barons once more, their expressions unreadable. Yet there is something in their gaze that haunts him. It is not triumph that he sees in their eyes. It is the cold, unwavering certainty of those who believe that they are right. The sound of the quill against the parchment is faint but clear. It is the sound of a monarch's downfall, the sound of history being written in the ink of a reluctant ruler. King John's hand trembles as he dips the quill into the ink. His breath catches in his throat as he writes his name. It is a simple act, but in that moment, it feels like the end of everything. His name, once a symbol of power, now marks the moment when the course of history shifted. The king signs a Magna Carta, and with it, he signs away his absolute power. The seal is pressed into the wax, and the sound it makes, a sharp, echoing crack, sends a chill down King John's spine. It is the sound of a king's power being shattered, the sound of a man bowing to the will of others. It is the sound of surrender. The barons do not cheer. They do not rush forward to embrace their victory. There is no fanfare, no cry of triumph. For them, this moment is not a moment of joy. It is a moment of necessity, a moment when the balance of power has been restored, not through force, but through the power of words, of law, and of unity. They have won a victory, but it is a victory tempered by the knowledge that the struggle is far from over. As the king steps away from the table, the weight of the document in his hands, his soldiers and advisors begin to gather around him, their faces somber, their steps heavy. The battle is not won with this signing. It is only the beginning. King John knows that the Magna Carta will change the course of his reign. It will limit his power. It will redefine his relationship with his nobles, and it will shape the future of England. But it will not silence the rebellion. It will not stop the winds of change from sweeping across the kingdom. The barons have won this battle, but the war is far from over. The hall falls silent once again, the fire in the hearth crackling softly in the background. The king's gaze lingers on the Magna Carta, the ink still fresh. It is a contract, a promise, but it is also a burden. It is a burden that will follow him for the rest of his life, a reminder of his failure as a king, a ruler who lost his way, and a man who was forced to yield to the will of those he once ruled with an iron fist. As the barons depart, their faces grim but resolute, King John is left alone in the hall, his heart heavy with the knowledge that his reign has changed forever. The Magna Carta has been signed, but it is not the end. It is only the beginning. The kingdom is no longer his alone to rule. The voices of his subjects, of the barons, the clergy, and the common people, will now be heard, and they will not be silenced. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, and the rain begins to fall in earnest, a steady downpour that washes the earth clean. The thunder rumbles in the distance, but inside the castle, there is only silence, a silence that speaks volumes. The future of England has been shaped, and it is a future where no man, not even a king, is above the law. The Magna Carta is a symbol of this new world, a world where power is no longer held solely in the hands of the monarch, but shared by the people, the land, and the law. King John may have signed the document, but it is the people of England, the barons and the peasants alike, who have taken the first step toward a new era. And though King John may remain on the throne, his power is no longer absolute. He is no longer a king above all. He is a king bound by the law. The dark clouds above Runnymede seem to carry with them the weight of centuries of conflict, the burden of a nation in turmoil. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of rain and earth, as if the land itself feels the impending storm, both in the sky and in the hearts of the men who have gathered here. The sound of hooves, steady and unyielding, can be heard from the distance, drawing closer with each passing moment. The barons, those lords of England who have long simmered in discontent under King John's rule, stand like shadows on the edge of the field, their faces grim, their eyes hard with resolve. They know what must be done today. They know what they are about to demand from a king who has not earned their loyalty, from a monarch who has spent his reign alienating those he was supposed to serve. The wind whispers through the trees, carrying with it a sense of quiet power. It is a power that has been building for years, ever since the abuses of King John's reign began to take root. His failures in war, his demands for higher taxes, his arbitrary imprisonments, and his unrelenting desire to tighten his grip on the kingdom have driven these men to the breaking point. The Magna Carta, this simple yet profound document, is a product of that tension, a moment when rebellion and reason have come together in the form of a single parchment. It is not a document born of whim, but of necessity. The barons are not here to ask for favors. They are here to demand justice. As the first drops of rain begin to fall, a lone figure rides into the clearing. The sound of his horse's hooves is like a drumbeat, signaling the arrival of the man who holds the power to change the course of history. It is King John, his face obscured by a crown that seems too heavy for him, his posture straight but weary, as though the weight of his crown is now a weight that pulls him downward, into the depth of fate he cannot escape. His gaze is firm, but there is something else behind his eyes, something flickering, something uncertain. He is not the mighty monarch of his youth, the man who once led armies and expanded his kingdom. He is a king now caught in the snare of his own mistakes, the consequences of his actions pressing in on him from every side. King John's arrival is met with silence. The barons stand in a tight circle, their expressions unreadable, but their message is clear. They have come for justice. They have come to demand that the king surrender his absolute power, that he recognize the rights of the people, and that he be held accountable for the tyranny he has wrought upon the land. The Magna Carta is not just a document of grievance. It is a declaration of liberty, a call for the restoration of the balance of power that has been lost in the wake of unchecked monarchy. The king dismounts slowly, his movement stiff, and the sound of his boots hitting the earth seems to resonate across the field. It is as though the ground itself is reminding him of the weight of his decisions. King John walks toward the table where the Magna Carta rests, the parchment a stark contrast to the heavy black armor he wears, as though it is both a symbol of his defeat and the possibility of his redemption. He stands there for a moment, silent, looking down at the document. His hand trembles slightly as he reaches for the quill. He knows what this moment means, what this signing will mean for the future of his reign, for the future of England, for the future of kingship itself. The barons are not his enemies, not in the way that the French were or the Scots. They are men who have pledged their loyalty to the crown, who have served him faithfully, until the burden of his misrule became too much to bear. The Magna Carta is their answer to the chaos he has created. It is not just a list of demands. It is a symbol of their struggle, a symbol of their defiance in the face of tyranny. The king's signature on this document will be the moment when his absolute rule is over, when the divine right of kings is no longer unquestionable. The air grows thicker with every passing second as the king's hand hovers above the parchment. The sound of the quill dipping into the ink is sharp in the stillness, but the moment it touches a page, it is as though time slows. King John's breath catches in his throat as he writes his name, the final stroke of his signature, sealing not only the fate of his kingdom, but the fate of his reign. With that single act, he acknowledges that the power he has enjoyed for so long is no longer his alone to wield. It is a moment of surrender, a moment when a king must give up not only his arrogance, but his belief in his invincibility. The quill leaves the parchment, and the king presses his seal into wax, a loud crack resonating through the stillness. The seal is the symbol of his authority, his power, but now it is the symbol of his subjugation. He has signed away the absolute power he once held. It is a defeat, yes, but it is also a recognition that no monarch, no matter how great, can rule without the consent of those he governs. The Magna Carta is not just a piece of paper. It is a contract between the king and his people, a contract that says no man is above the law, not even the king. As the king steps back on the table, the barons do not move forward in triumph. There is no cheering, no clapping, no joy in the air. They know that this moment is not a final victory. It is only the beginning. The Magna Carta will reshape the kingdom, but the road ahead is uncertain. The signing of the document is not an end to the conflict. It is the beginning of a new struggle, one where power will no longer be held by a single monarch, but shared between the king, the barons, and the people. The rain falls in earnest now, soaking the earth beneath their feet, as if the heavens themselves are cleansing the land of corruption and injustice that have festered for so long. The wind howls, carrying with it the scent of the storm, the scent of change. King John turns away from the table, his face pale, his eyes hollow. The weight of what he has just done hangs over him like a cloud that will never dissipate. The Magna Carta has been signed, but the future is now unknown. He may still wear the crown, but it is no longer his to rule as he once did. The barons, too, begin to disperse. Their faces set in determination. Their eyes focus on a long road ahead. They have achieved a victory, but it is not one that will bring instant peace. The Magna Carta is not a magic document that will erase all their struggles. It is a first step, a powerful statement, but the path to true justice will be long and fraught with obstacles. They know that King John will never fully accept his diminished power, and they know that the forces of rebellion are still strong, still simmering beneath the surface. As the barons ride off into the distance, their cloaks billowing in the wind, the field is left in silence. The storm begins to subside, and a faint light breaks through the clouds, casting the land in a soft, golden glow. It is a moment of quiet reflection, a moment where the full weight of what has just happened begins to sink in. The Magna Carta has been signed, and the course of history has shifted. England will never be the same. The balance of power has been irrevocably altered, and the king is no longer the sole ruler. The people, the barons, and the law will now have a voice in the kingdom's future. King John remains standing at the edge of the field, his face a mask of contemplation. The signing of the Magna Carta is a defeat, yes, but it is also a moment of possibility. The land has been irrevocably changed, and though the future is uncertain, it is also one where justice is no longer a distant ideal, but something that can be grasped, something that can be fought for, and something that can be achieved. The king may have lost his absolute power, but the Magna Carta has set in motion a revolution not of bloodshed, but a law of principle and of the understanding that no man is beyond the reach of justice. It is a revolution that will reverberate through the ages, shaping not just the future of England, but the future of monarchies across the world. And as the last remnants of the storm disappear and the first rays of sunlight break through the clouds, there is a sense of quiet hope. The Magna Carta is the dawn of a new era, one where the power of kings is tempered by the rights of people, and where justice is no longer a luxury of the few, but the right of all. The wind howls through the narrow corridors of Windsor Castle, its mournful cry echoing through the stone walls, as though the very air itself is mourning the fall of a once mighty king. The grand halls, once filled with the sound of revelry, are now steeped in an eerie silence. The flickering of candles casts long shadows, stretching across the floors like the remnants of an empire slipping into the past. King John, the monarch who once ruled with the arrogance of a man who believed his crown was ordained by God, now walks the halls like a ghost, his every step heavy with the burden of his failure. The weight of the Magna Carta, which he reluctantly signed only days ago, hangs over him like a dark cloud that will never lift. He pauses before a window, gazing out over the mist-covered landscape, his eyes distant, lost in thought. The world beyond seems to mock him. The kingdom, which he once held in an iron grip, now feels like a distant, unfamiliar place. King John, a man who had known nothing but absolute power, now finds himself shackled by the very laws he once viewed as beneath him. He no longer commands his people with the same authority he once wielded so effortlessly. The Magna Carta has torn away his illusions of invincibility, and now every decision he makes feels like a surrender. His enemies, the barons, those once loyal men who serve him, have turned against him, demanding accountability, demanding justice. They have struck at the heart of his reign with the sharp precision of a blade. And in their eyes, he is no longer the mighty king, but just another man bound by the law. Inside the castle, the noise of the court is muted. The voices of his nobles no longer filled with the fawning adulation they once offered him. Instead, there are whispers, murmurs of dissent. King John has failed to fulfill the promises he made when he signed the Magna Carta. He has tried, in the days following the signing, to regain some measure of control, to show the barons that he still holds the reins of power, but the truth is undeniable. The document has already begun to chip away at his authority. The nobles who once feared him now speak more openly. Their voices no longer trembling with the fear of royal retribution. His soldiers, once fiercely loyal, are starting to question his leadership. King John knows that his position is no longer secure, and that fear gnaws at his heart. The Magna Carta, once seen as a necessity for peace, has now become a constant reminder of his impotence, of the fragility of the throne he occupies. The Magna Carta was not merely a document. It was a spark that ignited the flames of a revolution, one that would not be easily extinguished. The signing was supposed to be a moment of resolution, an end to the unrest that had plagued the kingdom for so long. Yet in its wake, it has created an even greater chasm between the monarch and his people. The barons, who had demanded the Magna Carta as a way to curb the king's excesses, are not satisfied. Their demands have been met, but there is still a hunger for justice that has not been satiated. The king's inability to truly adhere to the terms of the Magna Carta only deepens the divide. The promises made in the document are as fragile as the parchment it was written on, and with every day that passes, the tension grows. King John knows that he cannot rule as he once did. The days of acting with unchecked authority are over. The Magna Carta has introduced a new reality, one where the law, not the whims of a monarch, dictates the course of the kingdom. The king is no longer above the law, but this knowledge does little to soothe the wounds of his pride. King John, who had once believed that his word was law, now finds himself bound by the very document that was supposed to ensure peace. The barons have won, but they have not yet won completely. They have taken a first step toward a more just society. But the road ahead is uncertain, fraught with struggle and the constant threat of rebellion. The king is no longer the ruler he once was, but a shadow of his former self, clinging to the remnants of a power that is slipping through his fingers. In the days following the signing of the Magna Carta, the king's court has grown increasingly divided. His advisors, those men who had once surrounded him with loyalty and servitude, now look at him with distrust. Some are emboldened by the barons' victory and begin to question their own allegiance to the crown. Others, perhaps more loyal to the king, attempt to reassure him, to remind him that he is still the king, still the ruler of England. But King John hears none of it. The words of his courtiers are hollow, as empty as the throne he sits upon. The weight of the crown is no longer one of authority, but one of constant fear. He is no longer a monarch with absolute power, but a monarch beholden to his people. Every decision, every action, is now scrutinized by those who once feared him. He begins to drink more heavily, seeking solace in wine, in the fleeting numbness it brings. But the wine does not dull the pain of his failure. The wind howls through the narrow corridors of Windsor Castle, its mournful cry echoing through the stone walls, as though the very air itself is mourning the fall of a once mighty king. The grand halls, once filled with the sound of revelry, are now steeped in an eerie silence. The flickering of candles casts long shadows, stretching across the floors like the remnants of an empire slipping into the past. King John, the monarch who once ruled with the arrogance of a man who believed his crown was ordained by God, now walks the halls like a ghost, his every step heavy with the burden of his failure. The weight of the Magna Carta, which he reluctantly signed only days ago, hangs over him like a dark cloud that will never lift. He pauses before a window, gazing out over the mist-covered landscape, his eyes distant, lost in thought. The world beyond seems to mock him. The kingdom, which he once held in an iron grip, now feels like a distant, unfamiliar place. King John, a man who had known nothing but absolute power, now finds himself shackled by the very laws he once viewed as beneath him. He no longer commands his people with the same authority he once wielded so effortlessly. The Magna Carta has torn away his illusions of invincibility, and now every decision he makes feels like a surrender. His enemies, the barons, those once loyal men who serve him, have turned against him, demanding accountability, demanding justice. They have struck at the heart of his reign with the sharp precision of a blade, and in their eyes he is no longer the mighty king, but just another man bound by the law. Inside the castle, the noise of the court is muted. The voices of his nobles no longer fill with the fawning adulation they once offered him. Instead, there are whispers, murmurs of dissent. King John has failed to fulfill the promises he made when he signed the Magna Carta. He has tried, in the days following the signing, to regain some measure of control, to show the barons that he still holds the reins of power, but the truth is undeniable. The document has already begun to chip away at his authority. The nobles who once feared him now speak more openly, their voices no longer trembling with the fear of royal retribution. His soldiers, once fiercely loyal, are starting to question his leadership. King John knows that his position is no longer secure, and that fear gnaws at his heart. The Magna Carta, once seen as a necessity for peace, has now become a constant reminder of his impotence, of the fragility of the throne he occupies. The Magna Carta was not merely a document. It was a spark that ignited the flames of a revolution, one that would not be easily extinguished. The signing was supposed to be a moment of resolution, an end to the unrest that had plagued the kingdom for so long. Yet in its wake, it has created an even greater chasm between the monarch and his people. The barons, who had demanded the Magna Carta as a way to curb the king's excesses, are not satisfied. Their demands have been met, but there is still a hunger for justice that has not been satiated. The king's inability to truly adhere to the terms of the Magna Carta only deepens the divide. The promises made in the document are as fragile as the parchment it was written on, and with every day that passes, the tension grows. King John knows that he cannot rule as he once did. The days of acting with unchecked authority are over. The Magna Carta has introduced a new reality, one where the law, not the whims of a monarch, dictates the course of the kingdom. The king is no longer above the law, but this knowledge does little to soothe the wounds of his pride. King John, who had once believed that his word was law, now finds himself bound by the very document that was supposed to ensure peace. The barons have won, but they have not yet won completely. They have taken the first step toward a more just society, but the road ahead is uncertain, fraught with struggle and a constant threat of rebellion. The king is no longer the ruler he once was, but a shadow of his former self, clinging to the remnants of a power that is slipping through his fingers. In the days following the signing of the Magna Carta, the king's court has grown increasingly divided. His advisors, those men who had once surrounded him with loyalty and servitude, now look at him with distrust. Some are emboldened by the barons' victory and begin to question their own allegiance to the crown. Others, perhaps more loyal to the king, attempt to reassure him, to remind him that he is still the king, still the ruler of England. But King John hears none of it. The words of his courtiers are hollow, as empty as the throne he sits upon. The way of the crown is no longer one of authority, but one of constant fear. He is no longer a monarch with absolute power, but a monarch beholden to his people. Every decision, every action, is now scrutinized by those who once feared him. He begins to drink more heavily, seeking solace in wine, in the fleeting numbness it brings. But the wine does not dull the pain of his failure. It does not erase the fact that his reign, once thought to be unshakable, has crumbled beneath the pressure of his own mistakes. The Magna Carta, signed in desperation, has set in motion a chain of events that no monarch, not even one as mighty as King John, can stop. The kingdom is no longer his command, and with every passing day, he feels his grip on it slipping further away. Meanwhile, the barons press on, their eyes fixed on the horizon, on the future they are shaping with the Magna Carta. Though they have won a victory, they know that this is only the beginning. The battle for power and justice is far from over. They push for more reforms, for more guarantees, knowing that their success depends on keeping King John's power in check. But the king, for all his failures, is not yet ready to relinquish his throne entirely. Though his power has been tempered, though the Magna Carta has stripped him of his absolute authority, he will not go down without a fight. The air in the kingdom grows heavy with the knowledge that the battle is far from over. The Magna Carta has redefined the relationship between the king and his people, but it has not eradicated the fundamental inequalities that have plagued the kingdom for centuries. The barons may have gained a foothold, but the common people still live in fear, still suffer under the weight of taxation and repression. The Magna Carta has set the stage for a greater struggle, one that will not be solved with a single document, but with the gradual shifting of power between monarchs and subjects, between the ruling class and the people. King John's reign will never be the same. The Magna Carta has set in motion the end of the old order, the beginning of a new era in which the rights of the people will be considered alongside the power of the crown. But the king's legacy will forever be marked by his inability to maintain control over his own kingdom. He will be remembered not as a wise ruler, but as one who lost his way, one who refused to heed the cries of his people until it was too late. His reign will be remembered as a cautionary tale, a lesson to future monarchs that power is fragile, and that even the mightiest of kings can be brought low by their own arrogance and greed. As King John sits alone in the dim light of his chamber, staring at the flickering flame of a candle, he understands, perhaps for the first time, the true cost of his reign. The Magna Carta, once thought to be the end of his troubles, has now become a permanent reminder of his failure. His kingdom may remain intact, but his power has been irrevocably changed. The land is no longer his to rule without constraint, and the people will no longer bow to him simply because he wears a crown. The storm of rebellion may have passed for now, but its echoes will resonate through the centuries. The Magna Carta is not just a document. It is the beginning of a new order, one in which power is shared, in which no monarch can rule as an absolute autocrat. The king may still sit upon the throne, but his power is no longer absolute. The Magna Carta has opened the door to a future where kings must rule with the consent of the governed, where the rights of the people are no longer subject to the whims of a monarch. The future has been written, and it is a future where justice and liberty will forever be intertwined. As the final echoes of the storm fade into the distance, the weight of the Magna Carta remains. It is a document that has altered the course of history, that has reshaped the relationship between rulers and the ruled. King John may still be the king, but he is no longer the absolute monarch he once was. The Magna Carta is a testament to the enduring struggle for justice, for fairness, and for the belief that no man, not even a king, is above the law. The great meadow at Runnymede is drenched in the aftermath of the storm, the land slick with rain, the earth heavy with the weight of history. The air, thick with the smell of wet grass and earth, clings to the skin like a reminder that change, though inevitable, is never easy. The distant sound of hooves echoes across the field, a procession of men in armored cloaks, riding toward a new dawn. The rain has ceased, but the sky remains an ominous gray, as though the heavens themselves are awaiting the moment that will seal the fate of a kingdom. In this silence, only the fluttering of banners and the occasional creak of leather stir the air. King John, standing at the edge of the gathering, seems smaller than he once was. His posture slumped as if the weight of the crown he wears has doubled in the past few days. The land that once bent to his will now seems to defy him. The Magna Carta, the great document that now lies before him, is not merely a piece of parchment. It is a symbol of everything that has gone wrong in his reign, a testament to his failures, and a harbinger of a new order that is beginning to take shape. The words written on that document are more than just ink on paper. They are the echoes of a justice that was long denied, a justice that now demands to be heard. As King John's gaze falls upon the Magna Carta, a deep, unsettling silence falls over the field. The barons, the knights, and the nobles stand in their ranks, their faces grave, their posture stiff with a sense of purpose. They are not here for celebration. They are here for accountability. The document they have forced upon the king is not a gesture of benevolence. It is a demand. They seek justice, equity, and restoration of balance. And though the king has been forced to sign it, he knows that the true battle is far from over. The signing of the Magna Carta may have marked the beginning of a new era, but it has also ignited a new war, one of law, one of justice, and one of the ever-present struggle for power. In the quiet moments that follow, as the ink settles on parchment, King John feels the full force of what he's just done. He has signed away his divine right to rule without question. He has accepted that, as king, he is not above the law. It is a bitter pill for a monarch who has long viewed himself as the embodiment of authority. His thoughts spiral back to the events that led him here, to this moment of surrender. For years, he had ruled with a heavy hand, placing his own desires above the well-being of his people. His extravagant spending, his brutal punishments, and his constant demands for more money from the barons had sowed the seeds of rebellion. Now, he stands before them, having relinquished some of the absolute power that once defined his reign. The Magna Carta is not just a piece of legal reform. It is a revolution in itself, one that lays the groundwork for a new political order. The power of the king is no longer absolute. The document insists on a balance, a system in which the king must answer to those who serve him, to the laws that govern his kingdom, and most importantly, to the people. It is a first step in a long, painful journey toward a system of checks and balances that will, over centuries, form the foundation of the modern world. But this moment, this quiet and solemn moment, is the birth of that future, and its implications are far-reaching. As the barons step forward, one by one, their expressions cold and determined, it is clear that the Magna Carta has already begun to divide England in ways that cannot be undone. For the king, this is not the end of his reign, but the beginning of his struggle. Though he has agreed to the document's terms, there is no guarantee that he will follow through. King John is a monarch used to bending the rules, a ruler who has long believed that he is above the law. In his heart, he does not want to submit to the demands of his subjects. The Magna Carta may have been signed, but King John's internal war has only just begun. His fear of losing control, of losing the throne, burns within him. He knows that the barons will not be satisfied with mere words. They will want action, and they will be watching him closely. The nobles and barons, standing resolutely by the document, have won a crucial victory, but they know that their success depends not on the king's signature alone, but on the king's willingness to implement the changes outlined in the Magna Carta. They have forced him to sign, but the true battle lies ahead. For now, the barons are in control, but their triumph is bittersweet. They know that this fragile victory could easily slip away if King John, in his desperation to regain his power, decides to rebel against the terms of the document. As the barons ride away, their faces grim but resolute, the wind picks up once again, a reminder that this moment is just a passing gust, a prelude to the storm that still looms. The road to peace, to true justice, is fraught with dangers. The Magna Carta has redefined the relationship between the monarch and the subjects, but has also set the stage for an even greater struggle, the battle for the soul of England. In the month that followed the signing, the kingdom is torn between those who champion the Magna Carta's vision of justice and those who long for the days when kings ruled with absolute authority. King John, though publicly subdued, begins to quietly undermine the document's provisions. He refuses to fully implement the reforms, particularly those that limit his ability to levy taxes and punish his enemies. As unrest grows among the barons, there is a palpable sense of unease throughout the kingdom. The promise of the Magna Carta is slipping through the cracks, and the noble class, disillusioned by the king's refusal to comply, prepares for the inevitable rebellion. Yet, the Magna Carta has already done its work. Its influence spreads far beyond England's borders. The idea that kings must answer to the law, that power must be shared and not hoarded, takes root in the hearts of the people. Across Europe, monarchs begin to take notice of what has transpired in England. The idea that a monarch is not above the law becomes a rallying cry, and other kingdoms start to consider the possibility of limiting the power of their rulers in similar ways. In England, the Magna Carta begins to shape the future in subtle but profound ways. The seeds of constitutional monarchy are sown. The barons, despite their anger and frustrations, understand that they are now part of a larger, more complex political reality. They have made their stand, but their struggle has only just begun. The Magna Carta has opened the door to a future where the people can hold their rulers accountable, where law and justice are no longer merely tools of the powerful, but rights of all. For King John, the years following the signing of the Magna Carta are marked by strife and rebellion. His kingdom is divided, his power increasingly contested. Though he fights to regain control, the once mighty monarch is slowly driven to ruin. In the end, it is not the Magna Carta itself that topples him, but the continued resistance to the changes it demands. King John's inability to adapt to the new reality of shared power, to rule not as a tyrant but as a servant of the law, ultimately leads to his downfall. His reign, once considered unassailable, crumbles beneath the weight of his own stubbornness and disregard for the promises he made. Yet, despite the king's collapse, the Magna Carta endures. It remains a symbol of the people's power, of the belief that justice must prevail even against the might of the crown. The ideals it represents, those of liberty, justice, and the shared responsibility between rulers and the ruled, continue to shape the political landscape of England for centuries to come. As the years pass, the Magna Carta is revisited time and time again. It is amended, reaffirmed, and built upon by successive generations, but its core principles remain unchanged. It becomes the foundation of a legal and political system that will influence nations around the world, inspiring the development of democratic ideals and constitutional frameworks. In the end, the Magna Carta is not just a document that changed the course of King John's reign. It is the document that changed the course of history. It is a testament to the enduring power of the people, to the belief that no man, not even a king, is above the law. And though King John's reign fades into history, the echoes of his failure, the failure to recognize the true source of power, resonate through the centuries. The wind dies down as the field at Runnymede empties, but its message remains. The Magna Carta is not just a historical document. It is a living testament to the fight for justice, a fight that continues to this day. And though the road to liberty is long and fraught with struggle, the Magna Carta's legacy endures as a beacon of hope for those who seek a world where power is shared, where justice is not a privilege, but a right. The ground at Runnymede still bears the imprint of history. The field, once bathed in the dim light of an overcast sky, now seems imbued with a weight far heavier than the storm clouds that had gathered above. The land is drenched in the aftermath of rain, its wet surface gleaming under the faint rays of the setting sun. It is a quiet moment, a lull after a storm that had raged not only through the skies, but through the very fabric of England itself. The Magna Carta, now signed and sealed, rests on the table where it was first presented to King John. The ink has dried, but its impact is still fresh in the air, still vibrating through the land. This document, no thicker than a few sheets of parchment, has altered the course of history. And yet, the struggle is far from over. King John's face, once so full of defiance, now seems drawn, the way of the crown more oppressive than ever. He has given his signature, but it is clear to all who witness this moment that the king's heart is not in it. He knows, deep down, that this is not the end of his rule, but the beginning of a new battle, a battle not for his crown, but for the soul of the kingdom. The Magna Carta is not merely a legal contract. It is a challenge to his very way of life, a stark reminder that no monarch, no matter how powerful, is beyond the law. The barons, who have forced the king into this reluctant submission, stand tall, their faces hard with resolve. They have achieved something monumental, but it is only the first step in what promises to be a long, arduous journey. The Magna Carta is not a final victory. It is a declaration of intent, a blueprint for a future where the king's power is no longer absolute. But as they leave the field, their expressions do not betray triumph. The world around them may have shifted, but they know that this new order will not come easily. They must fight to ensure that the promises made today are kept. For now, the kingdom is at a precipice. The Magna Carta has stripped the king of the unchecked power he once wielded. It has broken the illusion of divine right, of absolute monarchy, and replaced it with something far more dangerous for a ruler: accountability. King John's reign, built on centuries of tradition, has been thrust into uncharted waters. The very fabric of medieval kingship is beginning to unravel as power shifts slowly from the crown to the people. This shift, though subtle, will resonate through the centuries, its effects felt long after King John's reign has ended. In the immediate aftermath of Runnymede, the barons and the king retreat to their separate corners of the kingdom, and the echoes of the Magna Carta's signing reverberate throughout the land. The nobles, emboldened by their victory, begin to push for the implementation of the reforms promised in the document. The power of the king is no longer absolute. The law, something that had long been an instrument of royal control, has now become the very force that will hold the king accountable. But King John, despite his signature, is far from willing to comply with the terms set forth in the Magna Carta. His pride, his need to maintain control, still burns deep within him. He seeks to undermine the document provisions at every turn, attempting to avoid the limitations on his power and to assert his authority over the barons who had once sworn loyalty to him. The road to true implementation is rocky, fraught with resistance from both the monarchy and the barons who fear that any concession to the king will render their victory meaningless. The barons, too, are not immune to the temptations of power, though they have gained a significant foothold. Their actions are not driven solely by justice or the well-being of the people. They seek their own advantage, their own power, and in doing so, they risk turning the Magna Carta into a mere tool of political maneuvering. The document, which had been born out of struggle for justice, now becomes a battleground for competing interests. The kingdom is torn between the forces of monarchy and those of nobility, both of which are driven by their own ambitions. The Magna Carta's true legacy, however, is not in the immediate battles fought between King John and the barons. It is in the long-term impact it has on the political consciousness of England and, later, the world. The principles outlined in the Magna Carta, principles of accountability, the rule of law, and the limits of absolute power, lay the foundation for the modern concept of constitutional law. Though the document itself may have been a temporary measure in a specific historical moment, its principles echo through the ages, influencing the development of democratic governance, legal systems, and the very idea of human rights. The Magna Carta's impact extends far beyond England's borders. Over time, it becomes a touchstone for movements seeking freedom from tyranny, a symbol of resistance against oppression. The idea that a monarch is not above the law, that even kings must answer to people, spreads throughout Europe and the world. It inspires revolutions, constitutional reforms, and the establishment of governments built on the principles of justice and equality.